I think the biggest myth deals with this issue we just were talking about, that people think because somebody has a hit song or a big success that on a chart or whatever, that they are going to be a instant millionaire. They're just going to be wildly successful. And I'm here to tell you that that is the exception rather than the rule.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Dave Combs. And for those of you that follow the Inventive Journey, Dave was a guest on the Inventive Journey, so definitely feel free to go and check out the episode there. It was a great journey that he shared. But for today, we're going to talk a little bit about a few different things, which is actually by happenstance happens to be my wheelhouse, which is intellectual property, a little bit more to do with related to music and how you might monetize that and sell it, or leveraging intellectual property, and maybe even get into a little bit of the creative process of how you write or create and write music and songs, and then also dealing with some of the legal and logistical or obstacles that can sometimes pop up, and maybe even talk a little bit about inventory management and production planning. So there'll be a lot of fun conversations, and I'm definitely excited to have Dave on. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Dave.
Thank you, Devin. It's a pleasure to be here again. And we're going to have a great conversation this afternoon, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So now before we dive into the topics at hand, for those people that haven't caught your original episode, or they're saying, hey, I just want to dive into the expertise, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience? Take a minute or two, let them know a little bit about you.
Sure, be glad to. Well, I live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I was born and raised in the mountains of East Tennessee in a little town called Irwin. Grew up in a family that was musical. My mom and dad and my grandmother all played musical instruments, so I was around music and at home and in church, of course. I belonged to Calvary Baptist Church there in Irwin. The choir music and piano organ music was always a big part of our life. So music has been a big part of my upbringing. And then I went to college, got my bachelor's degree at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, a BS in mathematics and minor in physics. Worked in the computer center for 4 years. And so I exited college and went straight into my job at Western Electric as a computer programmer. So my real career for about 22 and a half years was in technology, starting off in computer programming and then into software management and inventory management, inventory control, production management, all the technical aspects of manufacturing. And then evolved, and about mid-career there, I wrote a song that we'll talk about that basically launched me down another career path, which was music. And so that's kind of the early part of my background, and we'll talk more about some of that, I'm sure.
So no, I think that's definitely a great intro, and it sounds like a fun journey, and it was fun to hear the first go around as well. So now, as we then go through that a bit more, so unpacking it, one of the things, and as a caveat, we're talking a little bit more about intellectual property, which is certainly a topic that near and dear to my heart, but happens to just be also a part of your journey. So it wasn't a plan, wasn't to have me on just to pitch myself, but I think that it's interesting how the overlap of intellectual property corresponds with some of the areas of expertise that you've had to garner. And so before we dive into that, and we definitely will, I'd say one of the first topics is, you got into, so you're doing the software program, you're doing some of those other things, and you got into creating music and writing songs and kind of doing that. So for those people that have always kind of wanted to break into the industry, or wanted to create a song, or wanted to get into the music industry, or had a great idea for some lyrics, or any or all the above, kind of, how do you go about kind of even dipping your toe into that or getting started?
Well, first of all, I would say that there is no need to be put off or hesitate to do something just because you don't understand the copyright law and all these aspects of intellectual property, which your firm, will guide people through. But that should not be a deterrent to somebody to saying, I could do something. Because you can always find somebody like you to help you through those, that minefield of bureaucracy or whatever you have to do. But the creative process of either writing lyrics or music or both, or creating any kind of intellectual property is largely up to you. And fortunately in this country, the copyright law says when you create something, it is immediately copyrighted. So when you write a song, it's copyrighted right then. Now, it's not registered with the Copyright Office in DC, which is really nothing more than just proving to the rest of the world that, yes, I am the creator of this. But you can create something, write a book, write a song, write music, whatever. It's as soon as you have written it, you put a Circle C and a date and your name, and it's copyrighted. It's yours. And now what you do with it from that point forward requires a lot of action on your part. You can put it in your desk and not do anything with it, and it'll stay there till the cows come home, so to speak. But you can also take a song or whatever you create and pursue it and embellish it and get it recorded or get it recorded by someone else or get a book published. You publish it yourself or you get a publisher to publish it for you. All those kind of things can happen, but the first thing that has to happen is you have to create it. So the creation process starts this whole ball rolling, and from then on, it's a matter of you can go as wide and as deep as you want to into all the many tentacles of intellectual property.
So, no, and I think that hits on a lot of things. But I think, the first one is really having to figure out what the creative process is or what you're going to write your song about and what the music's going to be. So let's say you get that in hand. So you say, okay, I have the world's best song and I write it and I produce it and it's, and I have a really good song, which I think there's a lot of people out there that do. Does not mean that everybody's going to be able to make a career of it or even make any money off of it. And I think that there's some disconnect sometimes between, hey, I've got a great, and it comes in a lot of forms, whether it's music and songs, or I've got a great idea or a great business. There's a big gap between the idea stage or even starting to develop it versus actually making it into a business. And so any thoughts, and I know you kind of got into how you monetize and leveraged IP and sold your songs, but how do you go about doing that as far as, songs in general, but IP and, in your area, how do you go about monetizing it or actually getting people to pay you for it?
Well, this day and time is vastly different than when I started out back in the 80s, where we had actual physical cassette tapes and physical compact discs that we were trying to sell through either music stores or in my case through gift shops that would hear my music and purchase it. Today, we are in a world of virtual and digital, but that also means it's very easy today to create songs and get them produced or arranged and recorded on your laptop system right in front of you. If you probably have a world-class recording studio right on your laptop, possibly. So getting the product actually recorded is not it's not a real big hurdle these days. Back then it was expensive to go rent a studio. I paid thousands and thousands of dollars for a week worth of studio time. Today, you don't necessarily have to do that. Now you can, of course, but you don't have to. But what you do with it beyond that point, and how do you monetize that? In my case, back then, I monetized it by physical sales through a physical store. Today, you can monetize your music through virtual sales and downloads. You can put it up on iTunes and all the platforms where it can be downloaded. Or you can put it up on Spotify and all the other platforms where it can be streamed. And as long as you have the intellectual property ownership of that song, you're the creator of it, and it's registered in your name. And another thing you probably need to do too, I need to back up and say, that's register your music with BMI or ASCAP as a songwriter, because there is where you're going to get your performance royalties from somebody performing it on the radio or on satellite. But once you've done that, and that's not a complicated process or expensive either, but getting it out there is a matter of learning how to get a song put on Spotify. How do you get a song put on iTunes or on Apple Music? And those are not difficult tasks either. Or get it into Amazon. Amazon Music is another. They you can go and they will tell you what's the process for getting it there. But you really first of all have to have, in my mind, a product that realistically people have said, I like what you have created, and I would be willing to pay money to own that song or to be able to play that song on my device or at home. And once you have that knowledge that you have created something that has value to the consumer, then the rest of it is a lot of just blood, sweat, and tears and hard work of getting it up on the platforms and promoting your music in every venue you can find, whether it's getting somebody to write a nice little article about you in your local newspaper, start there. Go on and get the local TV cable station to come out and interview you and say, oh, here's this new local songwriter just written a new song. You can make up a really good story about yourself, and chances are they'll publish it or they'll air it on TV. So start getting your publicity and then just begin to add on to that and look for opportunities everywhere you have an opportunity to talk about your music, to play it, to sing it, to perform it in whatever fashion you do. Take advantage of that. And over time, there's no guarantee, but over time, you probably will have success with your music. And in my case, it was a long journey from 1981 of writing the song to today. What's this, 41 years later? That's a long journey. But it was a journey filled with exciting times and some frustrating times, but some aha moments and some successes and some really touching moments. So just, buckle up for the journey. It's going to be quite a ride.
Well, let me ask, because you hit on one of those, because I think one of the difficulties in the day and age, and I'm sure it's not just in today's day and age, but maybe it's been accelerated, is people get the misconception that, I'll have everything's an overnight success. In other words, I'll write a song, I'll put it on YouTube, or I'll put it on Spotify or something of that nature, and bam, it will be caught up and everybody will love it and it will be lots of downloads. And how do you get it? Or first of all, how do you choose? Because I guess I'm asking a lot of questions, but I'll give you a chance to respond. But one of the things that you did that I know when we talked about your journey is you went a different path of, rather than just going on, doing the traditional path, you went into gift stores and you did some, and did it as kind of gift giving, and, went into some of those other types of stores, which is non-traditional, which I think in today's day and age, you still need to go non-traditional and sometimes. But how do you figure out where to market it, how to market it, who's the people you take it to, and kind of how do you go about tackling all of that of getting it into the marketplace and figuring out what that path is?
Well, first of all, I would highly discourage you from trying to do it yourself. If you're going to sit in your room or your home or whatever and just talk to yourself about how am I going to do this, it's probably going to be a long conversation and not a lot of information gathered from it. Yes, you can get online on the internet and Google and search all these you can find out anything basically on the internet these days. But I would say find yourself a circle of people. It doesn't have to be a big circle, just a 2 or 3 people that you trust who are in that, or at least peripherally into that industry in some way or fashion. Get to know those people, pick their brains, and bounce some ideas back and forth. And you never know when you're brainstorming about whatever it is you're trying to create, where the new idea is going to come from. Sometimes, like in my case, I had no idea that my music was not going to be sold in the big box stores where I thought it should be sold. It was going to be sold in a place I'd never thought about, which was in gift shops. Well, now that's just an analog to today's environment of there's so many ways of exposing your music or whatever it is to the world. Think outside the box. Don't limit yourself to it's got to be done just like John Doe over here did it. You can create a path and a trail of your own making. Just try to think outside the box, but don't try to do it by yourself. You have got to get people, like you, Devin. Devin, you're involved with a lot of entrepreneurs, and so that gives you a tremendous exposure to ideas. You get a new client that comes in and has a new product, a new something. Well, you learn something too. Well, by connecting with folks like you and other entrepreneurs, you're going to learn a tremendous amount. And I have found that entrepreneurs, by and large, are an extremely open and giving group of people. They do not hesitate to help someone else that's trying to also make a go in the entrepreneur world. So gather yourself around a team of people that will lift you up, support you, and give you good ideas, and that team will move you forward.
No, I think that's definitely a great piece of advice, and I think it's one that people should and certainly take to heart. So, building that team, I think gives you it gives you more expertise than you can ever garner on your own. But two, it also gives you some insight as to other ways of thinking things, tackling and approaching it, and it always makes, I think, for a fuller sense. So now, as we've hit on a few topics, and maybe shifting gears just a little bit, because I know that one thing that you'd mentioned is both on the kind of the legal as well as logistic hurdles or obstacles that you may hit into. I guess the first question is, what are some of those obstacles that people may want to anticipate, and how do you deal with them when you hit those obstacles?
Well, first of all, don't be put off by them. And my approach to any obstacle in my way has always been, I ask myself, well, how can I get over it or under it, around it or through it? There's got to be a way to move to the other side of that obstacle, whatever it is. And so you may have to go in a different direction, left or right, up or down or whatever, but you can get around it. And in today's environment, of course, we run into all kinds of obstacles. I mean, good heavens, the whole country is in a big obstacle right now of logistics. We've got these cargo ships, containers offshore by the hundreds trying to get into port because we have a choke point at our ports of entry. And somebody some time ago did not really solve that problem or anticipate that level of peak demand for there, and we're not geared up for it. And it's not the kind of thing you can just snap your finger and create a whole new port someplace. So it's a big problem. And down at a small scale, as a small business person, you're probably going to run into some problems. Some days maybe your shipment might get lost and you have to go tracking it down through either UPS or FedEx tracking and figure out and then what do you do about it? Of course, you try to make the customer happy, and all those kind of little day-to-day problems that pop up, you find a way to solve. But it's all in the logistics of how you're delivering whatever product or service you're creating to your customers. And it may be the internet's down one day. Now what do you do? So, a lot of us are dependent upon the internet for our day-to-day commerce. So you need to have a plan B. Well, what do we do if the internet's down for 8 hours or 4 hours or whatever? So you probably have to have a paper trail stack of orders over here that you can write something on a piece of paper in the meantime and enter it in the computer later. So it's that kind of planning ahead and anticipating obstacles or setbacks, and sometimes you cannot anticipate them, but you just need to be prepared to deal with them and have the confidence in yourself that I can get through this. This is not going to stop me cold. I'm going to move ahead.
No, and I think that that's a huge difference in between those that are successful and they are able to make it through the obstacles, and those that aren't. Now, one question that kind of came to mind as you were talking through a bit of those, and I'll put it at, or given that you've been around or had a lot of experience for a while within the music industry, one of the things that I would anticipate is there's been a shift, right? So I'm guessing, and correct me where I'm wrong, at the start of your career, you didn't have Spotify, you didn't have a lot of the online streaming. You started in the gift, the kind of the, small shops and gift giving and those type of things, and then continue to evolve. But, with that as kind of the backdrop, when you're looking at, as the industry is evolving, in other words, because it has evolved. It used to be that you would buy it on a cassette tape, and then you went to a CD, and then you went into downloadable. Now you have it streaming, and now you have it on YouTube, and it's, everybody always thinks that, today and day and age is different, and it is, but there's also always an ongoing evolution. And when you're hitting that evolution within the industry, within the music industry, of new and different ways, how do you go about figuring those out or tackling them or pivoting to make sure that you can continue to be successful?
Well, one of the things you got to do is you got to keep yourself at least somewhat knowledgeable in what is going on in your industry in terms of what is there consolidation going on. People are buying up the small guys, and it's going to be 2 or 3 big entities in the end process. or is it splitting it up? I mean, a lot of times industries go and divide into much smaller industries. And so, but you need to be aware of what's going on in your industry, and especially aware of what the commerce is doing with the technology that's going on today. You know, who knew that, 5 years ago or 10 years ago that online purchasing of products would be like it is today, where I order something online today and it's on my front door tomorrow. Or if you're fortunate to be in one of those test cities where the drone brings it to your front porch today, it's amazing. But the point is, you need to keep up with what's pertinent to your product and industry. What's the technology doing? And you need to stay plugged in with that. Don't just stand back and read an article every now and then. You need to kind of stay on top of things and know where the trend is taking. And sometimes it can take a fairly sudden change of direction when some new technology comes along or some new event happens that changes everybody's attitude towards, like the pandemic did. It sure took us away from going to a physical store there for a long time. So people that were totally reliant on bricks and mortar, a lot of them closed the door and said, well, that's it, I can't do it, because they weren't ready. They didn't understand that they needed to be ready for an online process where they can do something virtually and deal with their customers electronically and virtually as opposed to in person. So the key is stay on top of your technology and where it's headed and what's going on as best you can, and be ready. And like in my case, when Spotify came along, first thing I did was I got online and I said, how do I get my music on Spotify? And they had a little thing there. Here's step 1, 2, 3, Bob. Here's what you got to do. And there's a lot of work I had to do. I had to get my songs ready. I had to get ISRC codes for all my songs. It's a long digit. It's like a digital social security number for a song. But I had to get one for every one of my songs, which I didn't have at the time. Got that done, submitted it to Spotify. Well, Pandora comes along. How do I get my music on Pandora? Same thing. As soon as you find out about it, get on there and say, well, how do I do this? And start doing it. You don't wait, because, as they say, wait's what broke the bridge down. So, it's a process of doing it as soon as you learn about something, jump on it and make it happen for yourself. So that's, I guess, kind of a long-winded answer to that question, but you really do need to stay on top of technology because it is changing fast.
So now a follow-up question to that, which is, I agree, technology is changing fast. So where do you see, because you've seen, I would say, a good amount in the sense that you started with the industry, now you're online, you've had to pivot, you've had to figure out where it is. Where do you see, for kind of the music industry in general, any thoughts or tips or inklings as to where you see it going, or kind of what's the next phase for things?
Well, I really think that music has proven that it's largely going to be a virtual, non-physical product delivery. When I go out for a bicycle ride or a run, I see people with their earbuds in their ears and they're listening to music, usually from their phone or whatever device they have on them. And so the delivery of music in the future, I believe, is going to be 99% virtual and digital. So we're practically there now. There's still some downloading takes place where you can download it to your phone and then play it without having to be on the internet. But by and large, I think that's even declining as well. And buying a physical CD, those are really declining fast. Yeah, you pretty much have to, if you're going to write a new song, you've got to come out with a CD to just have something to hold in your hand and say, see, this is my new album right here. You need to go buy it.
I made it.
I made it. Look at this thing. So anyhow, so you probably will still have to have something physical to display to somebody. But when they want to go get it, they're going to go on Amazon or wherever they go, and they're going to download it. Or they're going to say, I'm just going to go to Spotify and say, all right, just let's stream this song by this new artist over here. And if you've got it up there, they'll be listening to your music instantly, just like that. Now, there's another whole issue here that we can talk about, and that is the payment to the artist, the creator of the intellectual property. That is kind of a bone of contention to me and a whole slew of other creators, because the remuneration for the creator of the intellectual property is minuscule. I mean minuscule. You have to stream my song 5 times for me to get 1 red cent, 1 penny. Well, you stop and think about that. Somebody has listened to my music for, let's say the song's 3 minutes. They've listened to my music for 15 minutes. On my dime, I've spent all the money to create it and record it, the thousands of dollars to put the album together, all that kind of thing. They get 15 minutes of my music. Send me a penny. Now, what's wrong with that picture? It's going to be hard to make a living 1 penny at a time. And that's the real issue for creative people, for musicians trying to break into the music industry. It's going to be very difficult if your total income is going to be from downloads and streaming. The only way that folks most of the time can make a living at it these days is through the live performances. And even the last 2 years, even that got knocked out from under us with the pandemic. You couldn't go out and give a concert, so those people were really, really hurting. So it's a changing industry, and the payment for the musician and the creative property, intellectual property, is very hard to come by these days. And I'm hoping that somebody will help straighten that out some way. But there's a whole lot of fingers in the pie trying to get that. Let's say it's $1 of the music, then if 1 penny goes to the creator of it, where's the other 99 cents going? So there's a lot of people grabbing after the piece of the pie for that intellectual property and the music money. But I'm hopeful that there will be some resolution to that, but it's going to be a slow in coming, I'm afraid, because there's so many players that have a vested interest in it.
No, I think that you're right, and it's one of those, I think, in the industry where it evolved, and at some point that there was a large investment to get a person's name out there, get all the CDs, get the music cut and everything else. And yet as that has evolved, it hasn't always caught up to, there's now the adjustment and compensation, is a lot of those are no longer needed or have pivoted and adjusted. But that could be, I'm sure, an area where we could digress for a long period of time.
You're right about that. I think we'll leave that one alone for now.
Well, as we wrap up for this episode for today, I always have one question I'd love to ask at the end of each episode. So we'll jump to that now, which is, within your industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong?
Well, I think the biggest myth deals with this issue we just were talking about, that people think because somebody has a hit song or a big success that on a chart or whatever, that they are going to be a instant millionaire. They're just going to be wildly successful. And I'm here to tell you that is the exception rather than the rule. That's probably the biggest myth, that when people hear a song they love, they think the creator of it is just going to be a wonderfully successful person, but they're probably struggling to make a living just like you are. So it's a really tough business, but that myth is that there are some wildly successful people, but you can count them on, a couple of hands here that are making tons and tons of money. But most of them are really hardworking. They work their butt off and do shows and whatever. But by the time they pay the band and the venue and all this stuff, they're not making a whole lot of money more than you in your job that you're working. So when you have a chance to go see a hardworking musician, I would say go do it, because they need your help. They want your support. It's worth it.
No, I think that's a great takeaway, because I think that a lot of times people do see the TV shows and the movies and the overnight successes, and they get that as, hey, that's the rule, and all I have to do is put out a great song. And you do have to put out great content, but that is only a small portion of a much bigger one. I think that's a great myth to dispel. Well, as we wrap up, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to buy your music or download your music, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Well, the best way is just simply go to my website, which is combsmusic.com. And at the bottom of the page is my email address, which is also real simple. It's just dave@combsmusic.com. But on my website, you'll see my book on the cover on the left, and underneath it's a link to go to Amazon and get it. And on the right is my CD of Rachel's song, which you can click on the link below that and go to Amazon and either buy the CD or listen to it streaming or download the MP3 file. And in the middle of my website, if you want to listen to the one song that got all this started, Rachel's song, and I encourage you to do that, click on the link in the middle, and you will be playing instantly Rachel's song, and it's the original recording. It's not a watered down demo. It's the real thing. So listen to Rachel's song, and if you like that, then check out the rest of my music. There are links at the top of my page, but that's the main thing. combsmusic.com. That's all you need to remember.
All right. Well, I definitely encourage people to download, listen to the music, and make sure that you at least listen to it 5 times, and so you can get that 1 cent. So
Thank you.
with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you listeners that are out there, have one or a couple things for you, or quick requests. If you can make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review. We want to make sure everyone finds out about all these areas of expertise in order to help and grow their business. And on that note, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup or small business, reach out to us. Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Dave, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you, Devin. It's been a pleasure.